Critical thinking is a lot like being nice or open-minded. Everyone thinks they do it, and that no one else does. I think critical thinking is surprisingly easy, but I think people tend to be very confused about what it is. If you ask a group of people to define what critical thinking is, I suspect they would likely coalesce around a definition something like viewing a thought or statement with suspicion and validating its truth. In other words, we should disbelieve new information until we have that information proven to us to a reasonable level. Well, this might sound rational. I would say this is completely backwards. There are huge volumes of text written about our failures as humans to be able to correctly process information. This is largely because we're very primitive machines in terms of our intellect. We have enormous limitations, and we are quite literally not built for computation. We are able to do it, but with difficulties, errors, and significant effort to recognize that those errors even exist. If you've not already read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, you owe it to yourself to read it. After even the first 100 pages, you'll learn that we are not really built as thinking machines, and you will understand a few of the reasons why we should doubt ourselves. One of the most significant fundamental details you can take away from the book is this. Evolutionarily, our brains are expensive. Brains run on glucose. We would really like to conserve glucose if we can, and deep thought and questioning ourselves would run contrary to that. So to a great extent, we are evolutionarily programmed to not think too much. So let's suppose for a minute that you just had an epiphany and said to yourself, wow, everything I think may be wrong because I'm not built to be a thinking machine. That would be a great insight. And that would make you really good at questioning things you think from this moment on. The problem is, you have a much larger problem. You have an extremely large inventory of things that you already believe. You've been raised in a society with a lot of ideas taught to you, a family that has heavily influenced you, friends that you often model yourself in terms of, and a relentless crush of media, movies, music, and things you read that have informed what you think. You probably believe the things you believe very strongly. And here's the most important part. You're probably not questioning the things that you learned in your earliest years that are still a part of your daily life. Don't hear what I'm saying as, you've been brainwashed your whole life and you need to question everything. Most people have a pretty reasonable view of the world and have jettisoned anything over the years that was really crazy. I'm just trying to explain what I think critical thinking really is. I believe it is not so much about challenging new information. We do, of course, need to question whether things we hear are true or not. But I think real critical thinkers are people that recognize when they're rejecting new information why they are rejecting it, and if they are actually rejecting it for the right reasons. And a lot of this has to do with previously held beliefs. And these previously held beliefs may actually be the reason you're rejecting new information. This is actually the mechanism that would help you change your old beliefs, if any of them require changing. We're at an interesting place in our development as humans. Years ago, we tended to be inundated with messages that didn't fit with our view of the world. We were not necessarily as mobile. We had a limited number of options for media to consume. We were forced to interact more with others. Today, I can have deliveries made to my front door without ever having to set foot in a store. I can get my meals delivered the same way. I can get a job where I work remotely. And I can live chat with customer service bot instead of talking to an actual person. These are not bad things, but they can help us stay more isolated from things or people that are different from us. Media has also changed so dramatically. Think about news, which was offered by a few sources, including a few major networks and a few major newspapers. Now our news sources tend to be almost tailored to our specific views. So something that used to be a way that our beliefs might be questioned has now become perhaps more a source of comfort as opposed to something to challenge us. Again, these are not fundamentally bad things, but I think it's important to consider the impact. I don't think it's hard to see the connection between our ability to insulate ourselves and the general increasing intolerance for other people's opinions. We don't have more dissonance or disagreement than ever before in history. Think about real historic turning points like the French Revolution or the Civil War. I would contend that those were real significant disagreements around fundamental beliefs. Instead, what I feel like I hear today is a lot more contention around things that genuinely should not be that hard to get people to agree on. That's where I would go back to critical thinking. If two seemingly rational people are vehemently arguing their point of view around any of the political, theological or societal hot buttons of the day, are they really listening to each other? Are they really thinking about the facts? Did they actually consider what was informing their opinions? This is not about not questioning new facts. This is really about thinking about how we get to the opinions we already have. Most arguments, as you probably noticed, aren't about listening to each other's points of view anyway. So this is where I think critical thinking goes from being a theory to having a practical application. The place critical thinking can help you most is in your relationships. You have enormous amounts of impressions, conjectures, beliefs about the people closest to you, your family and friends, your partners, your kids. With all of them, you've no doubt fallen into patterns of behavior influenced heavily by the perception, and often misperception, of a highly questionable source, your brain. We are not good at turning raw data into quality analysis. Imagine when we further add on the fact that our fears and insecurities and emotions are strongly involved in heavily influencing our perception of what is happening. Honestly, I have to tell you that I wonder how we as humans ever make relationships work with all the things that we have working against us. Critically thinking about how we might have misjudged people is extremely hard work, but as you can imagine, it can pay huge dividend in terms of our relationships. The things that we avoid talking about, the behaviors that we accept as permanent, the aspects of our relationships that we give up on, all these things may actually be misunderstandings deeply rooted in our past misconceptions. Plus, since there is another flawed human on the other side of your relationship, there's a very real chance they have misconceptions about you and what your motivations are. Less important but also impactful are your other relationships with people like your boss or your coworkers. These are great opportunities to do the same kind of analysis. Think about what you have accepted as fact and consider if you might have been mistaken. One of the common expressions I've heard from students about teachers or people about their bosses is he or she hates me, as an explanation for bad grades or poor performance reviews. Obviously, I don't know every situation, and obviously this is possible, but I've seen a lot of these situations where the real reason was just someone misunderstanding what was expected of them. What if you took as a given that there was actually not the reason? Could you come up with another explanation? Is there something that you could be doing differently that might help you meet this person's expectations? Maybe one or both of you didn't understand where the other was coming from. Is there a way through more open communication for you to get on the same page? One of the best parts about critical thinking is that it really becomes second nature when you do it a lot. When you begin to question your thought processes, it quickly becomes ingrained and you don't have to voluntarily engage it. You'll find yourself questioning yourself first, which I think is also a significant mark of maturity. The world is filled with people that assume first that they're correct. Not starting from there and even being able to assume first that maybe you are mistaken is a huge step towards better, more critical thinking. So I believe critical thinking is two things: the obvious and easier part of questioning new information before you accept it as fact, but it is also this subtler and much more significant part of questioning your accepted beliefs before dismissing new information, thoughts, or points of view. If you want to grow and be better able to understand the people and the world around you, this is an absolutely fundamental first step. These are things I've learned. Thanks for listening.